Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video, and in this video I'm going to be doing a mythic tier list for fast characters. I thought I would break it down by trait first just because there are so many mythic characters. Then I would combine my tier lists and each month I would add the new characters to it. Pretty much as simple as that. It might be a little bit hard to navigate near the end, you know, once I've combined them all, because I think there are over 100 characters, well over 100 characters in the game now, so yeah, it's going to be chock-a-block, let's say, chock-a-block. I might have to be scrolling up and down to see the different characters on the different tiers. We're going to start off with the early release characters, so it's going to be in order of release. So you're most likely going to see things, you know, build from the bottom and go up on the tier list, just because primarily characters get stronger, generally speaking. Although sometimes a character can get some usage a little bit after they come out. So first off, we're going to start with Silver Mythic Vincent, who I think is going to be a decent B tier character in terms of what he can do. I think it's pretty basic, but once Faction Assault comes out, he's going to be maybe more important. You know, he's maybe good in certain game modes just because of his Lacerator. His kit works basically for what he does, but he's no raid and war character for sure. Then we have the next one is Silver Mythic Maggie, and she's going to be a B tier character as well. I think she's slowly come down from the like S tier, let's say, because she was pretty much the only free-to-play fast leader for like, honestly, like the first 7 to 8 months of the Mythic era. So if you wanted to use a fast leader, you had to use her for like challenge run and so on and so forth. It was pretty much as simple as that. Next up we have Heath, and Heath is going to be into D tier, and this is primarily because Heath is a control character with no control. His only real usage is the fact that he can kind of solo walkers to a certain extent. So if you are new to the game and struggling, if you just use a Heath, he generally can beat walker stages with just by himself. It takes a long time just because of the whole fact that he gives himself camouflage and so on and so forth. However, if he comes up against walkers that have special abilities like reflect and stuff like that, he could still potentially do himself a mischief, let's say. Next up we have got Tyrese, and I'll put Tyrese in B tier. Again, another character that just has slowly come down from like the S plus tier, to be honest. I think initially Tyrese was the guy. He was good in raids, war, he was good in conquest, he was pretty much good in every single area of the game, but his damage has obviously just slowly but surely become not as effective. Now if you did team him up with a defense down character, you could still potentially use him in things like challenge run and conquest, and I think in the early on, you know, the early conquest stages, he can still be quite useful. I don't think anything's changed there, as long as you have a character that does a little bit of defense down. Even as someone as simple as like S-Class Clementine, which is what I did. I had S-Class Clementine as a leader. Then I got him to rush because he can rush turn 1 with a command if he's got a 20% weapon, and you can blitz through quite a lot of conquest stages quite quick and easy that way. Next up we have Shiva, and I'd say she's quite high tier on the B. She'll definitely get pushed up to A tier if Faction Assault comes out and they stay true to what Faction Assault is all about in terms of like bleed being quite a primary thing. But right now, not too much amazing usage except on, you know, the odd challenge run stage. I did use her on personally, and she can be quite useful teamed up with the right character like Zachary, who can take out characters quite nicely. And she has only got 2 passives though. There are quite a few characters that got 2 passives, a lot of them on the initial release. So yeah, not as amazing to be honest. Next up we have Jesus, and I'd say Jesus is a C tier character. He's kind of weird. He's like a defense team disarm, and he didn't really ever like fully do too well. I think the only good thing he had going for him was the fact that he had an absolute defense weapon off the get-go, which was quite nice if you didn't have any. The majority of people did, but if you're like brand new to the game, I think he's in the current progression mission system. He's okay, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's like worth your resource input. He's okay to just like upgrade a little bit for potential roadmaps if you need to, like if Hilltop roadmaps come out of Hilltop, you know, maybe even a Mythic Trial comes out at some point. But other than that, no real usage. Gregory is going to be put up to beta as well. I think he could still be used on a defense team right now if you're short on characters. He has a pretty decent kit that, you know, can stop some potential in terms of like your team dying really quickly because of the AP down that he does if he gets taken out. So he's either going to have to be ignored. I think if I remember rightly, his rush was just a bit too slow. And I think he only does kind of like a random control like slow. It's kind of weird. Maybe he's got some impair on his signature move, but he's got some nice things in his kit. I think he's got bonus HP, and like I said, if he gets taken out, AP down to enemies. Now we have Glenn, and I would say Glenn is going to be an A tier character. He got me through all of Conquest. He's definitely a good support character for that, and what he does no one else can do. He can give 20 flat AP to any character, and if someone has a first turn signature move, which is 35 AP, and they get flat 20 AP, they're up to 55, which is hitting some people's rush requirements. If they need a little bit more, Glenn himself can hold an 8% weapon, and generally speaking, you'd only need one other 8% weapon, and you'd be able to rush someone turn 1. So like Lydia, I would have a 20% weapon in her hands, Glenn would have an 8% weapon, and then I'd command rush her turn 1 on Conquest. A very nice combo indeed. And like I say, no one else can do what Glenn does in any other trait, so he's still pretty useful. When it comes to the next character, it's going to be Gator. Another character kind of like Gregory. He can be used on a defense team kind of like in the meantime. He had his day. It wasn't a very long day. It was just like a couple of wars where he was pretty decent. But I think a lot of people have like Ransacker now, so aggro isn't as problematic. So there is that. Next up we have Carl. And I'm going to put Carl in C tier, but he's like so low in C tier. He's almost a D tier character. But I think with some tweaks, he could be better. I did come up against 2 Carls in a Conquest stage, and it was actually like pretty hard once upon a time. So there is potential that he could be tweaked. I think it's just his kit doesn't know what he wants to do. Does he want to be a defensive character? Does he want to be an offensive character? If they tweaked him where he was just all defensive, then it'd be absolutely amazing. Like he'd actually work for a defense team. If they tweaked him so he's an attacking character, he'd work for an attack team. It just needs to be one or the other. I would say probably a defense team character is the way to go. The next character is going to be Alpha, and I'd say Alpha's probably really low S tier and high A tier. She's a character that has slowly but surely become more useful. I think she's kind of like switched between S tier and A tier consistently, but I think from the starter characters, out of every single one, Alpha is probably the best, like by quite a margin as well in some cases, as you can see. She is very useful against certain characters with massive amounts of HP, because she can obviously infect them, she can crosshairs them, and that is really nice indeed. There is just some kind of weirdness when it comes to her kit in terms of like who she rushes. She doesn't do this infection to it's like the other character, and that can be a bit annoying if there's only one character left, but she has got quite a nice signature when she's LB3. I think it goes up to like 70% infection or something, which is pretty decent honestly, and because she got the Headhunter, there is the decaps as well that can potentially come in. So yeah, a pretty nice character. She can't be used in percentage damage dealer teams though, so she is still kind of niche, but I'd say, like I said, I think she's probably the best character that came out on the initial release characters for Conquest for sure. Now we move on to like the first like promos and event characters that came into RTS, and we have Ezekiel. I would say Ezekiel is probably high A tier, low S tier. I'm going to put him in A tier for now, just because I have got some other leaders that I would obviously put in S tier, and I don't think they're equal with Ezekiel, especially how people kind of see Ezekiel nowadays. Once Mia came out, a lot of people kind of like wrote off Ezekiel. She does counter a small part of his kit, but the rest of his kit is still good. He's got good passives, and he's got a good signature move, and he's got a good rush if it goes off. Like, it isn't like he hasn't got a good kit. I think most people maybe just save him for like tower teams and stuff like that. He's definitely not a bad leader. It's just like we have got a lot of leaders now, and some of the other ones are kind of like meta combative, and I don't think Ezekiel is at the moment. So there is that, and for the fact that you can remove his defense down block, which is kind of like one of the biggest things he brought to the table initially, especially when people could use S-class characters, and there were some S-class characters that did big defense down. He kind of stopped that potential there. Now we've got Ivanova, the first event team character, and I'd say she's pretty high on the B tier. She was actually pretty decent when she first came out. I never really used her. I was a Sandy fan, so I went with Sandy, but Ivanova was pretty decent. The only problem is, once I eventually got into a position where I was like, should I start using her because the challenge run was on the way and stuff like that, Lydia came out, and she just didn't have a chance. Obviously, Lydia outshines her quite drastically, but I have used her a bit in arenas, and she has quite a nice, cool idea with her kit where she gains AP based on enemies dying, regardless of the source. That sort of thing is like nice, it's fun, but we haven't seen that reused, so you know, we'll see if the potential of that in the future. But I think Ivanova has a fun kit. She just kind of fell off when it came to like the damage output that she brings to the table. Next up we have the King at one point, Dr. Stevens, quite annoying, definitely the king of previous eras as well. Quite an annoying character at some points in the Mythic era. The Halo, when it first came out, was problematic, but then people got used to it. The first real decaps came out, and then obviously not as much of a problem. I think the biggest issue with the specialist skill is the fact that it only happens once, but passive Halo happens like unlimited. It's infinite. So I don't think that's too balanced, honestly. So I think the specialist skill needs to be looked at, because I think whenever I see a character that has specialist skill Halo, I just go meh. Honestly, in my head it's just meh, because it isn't very good because of these other characters that have it infinitely on their passive. So maybe a tweak there, I'm not sure what it could be. So it at least happens more than once, I think. That's kind of ridiculous. Next up we have Martinez, and I think he's a B tier character as well. He maybe could be pushed up to A tier because he has got really good usage on like challenge run. Just because if you get him to rush quick, he's got heavy amounts of control and generally can make you win a stage because of that. But I wouldn't say he's very useful in like too much of the game. It's very limited, I think, to challenge run, to be honest. But he had potential, and he had quite a nice, I think, LB3 upgrade where he went from 2 characters getting confused for 2 turns to 3 characters for 2 turns. I think he's still one of the few characters that actually does that heavy level of control, at least up until recently. Next up we have Jessie Anderson, and I'm going to put her in A tier just because I think she is better than a lot of the B tier characters, and she's, you know, she is pretty tanky. She has some potential on attack. You can use her on challenge run, you can use her on conquest. So I think she's got good usage in quite a lot of parts of the game, but she gets outshined by a few characters. But she's still pretty annoying. You know, you can't one-shot her. You don't want to waste a normalize on her. She heals people, or at least does she heal people or herself? I think she heals herself. Honestly, she's just frustrating. Next up we have Zachary, and it's hard to tier Zachary, honestly, because he isn't very good in my eyes, but I still know he's an A tier character. But he's not very good because I counter him. I counter him all my teams. So if I didn't counter him, he would obliterate my team. So I've got to be fair here and say that he's an A tier character for sure. But he's probably like low A, high B in terms of how like useful he is, because just so many teams counter him, so many characters counter him. His usage is very limited. You can maybe get away with using him on some attack teams. You have to know what you're attacking, and you can maybe get him away with using him on certain conquest and challenge run teams. That's pretty much his primary usage. He's really good on conquest stages that have waves, just because he can actually build up his bleed to do even higher bleed on like the second wave, and so on and so forth, because he has aggro. Now we have the first payback, I want to say. It's the first payback to come to the game. I'm going to put him in A tier. It's going to be Negan. I think he has some usage. He kind of needs another character in the team to be payback, just because if you normalize him, he is pretty useless. That's all he has is his payback. But if you normalize him and there's another payback, you can't really risk like multi-hit rushes too much, or you can only do like single targets. Sure, Titan could potentially do that, but it's still going to be slow. That's why he's B tier. He's not like top tier for sure. But you never know. Things could change. There could be characters that come out that actually, you know, change out the potential of Negan. But his passives really relied on payback going off, and as a player, you could guarantee that payback didn't go off. You just didn't ever rush him. There was no way to force you to be rushing him unless you like risk the multi-hit and one of the hits hit him. That was just always the way, but you know, to be honest. Next character is going to be a Whisperer, and it is going to be Skins. I'm going to put him in B tier as well. I think it's kind of fair to put him here. He is a decent character. I don't think he really got a heavy usage, but I think he's probably one of the better fast challenge run characters, at least until the latest wave of fast characters came out, like Clementine and Molly and characters like this, because before you had to kind of like tank with your weapons and your face, and he gave you bonus HP to let, you know, tanking with your face, but a bit of an easier go of it. He can still obviously do that, so you can combine like Molly's Guardian Shields with the bonus HP just to give yourself a bit of a buffer. You know, survivability on turn 1 and on challenge run is not, you know, super easy, but he does take up a slot, and if you're going to take up a slot just for that, but I think you could probably make him quite offensive, and it still plays into his specialist skill. Being combat medic, he's going to do more bonus HP that way. Next up is Rosita, and I think Rosita's kind of sat at this tier for the entire time she's been released. She is a very heavy-hitting single-target character. Nobody really does it better than Rosita in terms of single-target. She does heavy amounts of damage. She can crit on that rush. She can crit on the signature move. She can hold a weapon that doesn't have any AP on attack at LB3 because she has signature moves that can go off every turn. So she's quite unique in that way. The fact that she's a disarm, though, she doesn't really support her teammates, and I think if she was more of a supportive disarm, I would have been, I would have preferred that. But she can't be controlled when she rushes, she can't be controlled when she does her signature move, and that's kind of underrated on a damage dealer. Let's say like a really top level damage dealer came out right now that had disarm. Let's say Kenny, the way Kenny works, I know follow-up is really important on his kit, but imagine if he had disarm. That means he'll never be controlled by a weapon, and there's a lot of 60% weapons out there right now, and if you think about when you rush with Kenny, he's getting controlled half of the time. A lot of the time his hits are getting blocked. So that's what Rosita ignores. Now that's why she has quite limited damage and single target, but that can be good as well. You're not going to rush the wrong target. You're always going to rush the right target. So that's actually pretty decent. You're not going to get like a random hit coming. Now the next character I'm placing is going to be Tara, and I'm going to be putting her in A tier, but I do think she's extremely high in A tier. And it wouldn't take too much just to push her into S tier. It would basically take fast and tough characters that are newer to have a good synergy together. And right now, I don't think that's the case. If a character comes out that actually, synergizes characters within those two traits, then that's going to be good. A lot of those characters that were don't get me wrong, there was a meta team at one point. There was the big team, but those characters are older. They're not like the primary team now, and a lot of those characters have been split up to be used on other teams. It's just kind of the way it goes. Lydia is going to be an A tier character as well. I'd still say she is extremely decent when it comes to Conquest and Challenge Run for sure. I think she's fallen off a little bit on attack teams for war, not just because of her damage, but also because initially it was a little bit of a problem in the fact that she had RNG normalized, but now they've got RNG, if you will actually hit it, because of the fact that they have resist. So it's like layered RNG that she would do it in the first place and then it could be resisted. So she can't be used as a normalized character. Her damage is completely random, so the second hit can always hit someone who you don't want it to. That was always a problem with her, and then as characters started coming out like Vance and stuff like that, it did become a little bit annoying, because you could obviously kill Vance and then normalize him afterwards, which is obviously frustrating. Next out is going to be Juan, and I'd say he's probably really high C tier and low B tier. Like he isn't as bad as Carl and Jesus in my opinion, but he just never really got good usage. I think some people potentially used him, but he was good when he was first announced, but people didn't get him until months later. And by the time people got him, they had other characters that did his job as good, if not better. So I don't think he ever really got a good run of it, unfortunately. No pun intended, Challenge Run character. But he could potentially be used on Challenge Run as you progress through that. If you're a newer player, he is going to help you. He has got the Confuse on basic attacks if you crit, but there are quite a few characters that can obviously stop that from happening. And you come up against that Negan leader on those Challenge Run stages, he will stop that from happening. Now we have Herschel as an attack lead. I would say he's definitely A tier. I think there's just less usage for him these days than there was once upon a time. But I think he's still pretty decent. He brings Normalize to the table. It can be useful against certain teams, I guess. But I would not say he has as much usage as he initially did once upon a time. It could, come back. The fact that he has Holiday Heroes potential as a Holiday Heroes character. Fast and Alert is the only, traits that you can use with him. That's kind of like the restrictor, because you could have potentially lose like Easter Eva on his team, but you can't because Easter Eva was tough. So it was kind of strange that way because he was an attack team character for the Holiday Heroes. But I still say he's pretty decent as an attack leader, but he's kind of like a niche attack leader for sure. And because it's percentage damage, you need to get a very good team with him for sure. Next out is Isabel. I'll put Isabel in A tier as well, just because she is kind of nice when it comes to buffing damage. Like she can buff Lydia in certain things like Conquest. She can buff Zachary in Challenge Run. She can buff these characters to do more damage, and she actually does pretty decent damage herself in these areas. I used her in Challenge Run quite a lot, and to boost up Zachary's damage and stuff, so it's nice. I would like to see more characters come out with that, like boost to certain trait damage, or boost to potentially let's say a mythic trial character that comes out that does an allegiance boost, like 15% attack to all characters that allegiance. I'd be down for that. I think that's actually pretty good. The next character is going to be Old Man Gregor, who is one of the coolest looking characters for sure. I'm going to put him in B tier. He's going to be going into that second row of B tier, as we see Heath just get pushed down. He's pretty much falling into the same trap that Shiva and Vincent are, where there's not really the game mode for him to actually shine, and he is definitely built for Faction Assault. So, like I said, if Faction Assault comes out, I'd say he's probably better than Shiva as a single character, but Shiva is a better team-based character when it comes to Faction Assault, so we'll have to see what happens there. Next up is Carol. We're on to the last like 10 characters or so, and I say Carol goes up to S tier. She's kind of sat around like B tier, honestly, for a very long time, and then she just got boosted massively with the introduction of like Peacekeeper primarily, just because Peacekeeper can be kind of countered by Camouflage. That's one of the main ways you can use percentage damage still against those teams, and Christmas Carol obviously brings quite a lot of Camouflage to the table, and it's got an 80% chance to proc, so it's actually pretty decent. I kind of saw her as like the new player's William as well at one point, where she has a lot in her kit that is a lot like Gold Mythic William, honestly, so it wasn't too bad initially. Like, that's why she would have been like high B, but her usage right now is honestly primary. I think she's going to be in quite a lot of attack teams against particular defense teams. Next up, we'll have Raulito. I think Raulito had potential, but I think he was more of a defense team character with terrible defense team stats, honestly. If he had better defense team stats, he probably had better usability. But I kind of figured there could potentially be usage for him on defense team if you lined him up with just one strong character, because he gives 80% defense to another strong character. But now there's a lot of ransack that can just get stolen away because it is just a buff, so it's not that amazing. Next up, we'll have Lao Po, who I think is a very, very high A tier character. She used to be S tier and S+, but she has been, countered by Easter Eva, so she has kind of dropped off a little bit. And I'm seeing her used less and less. She is a bit easier to use as well. Titan is, even now, still getting acquired by people, and Titan does quite well against Eva. Again, more people have ransack weapons, so her buff isn't much of a problem, but she was definitely one of the best characters. If she wasn't an S+ character, she was definitely S tier without too much of a problem for sure. Now we have the last defense leader out of the fast characters, and there are actually quite a few. He's going to be an S tier character. I'd say he's probably on paper the best fast defense leader for sure, and it's basically because he is a rainbow lead. That's all that he brings to the table over Tara, is that he's a rainbow lead. He's very accessible as well. He's one of the most accessible characters in the game. If you want to get a good defense team leader, this is the guy. He's in the Mythic market. He's actually a Mythic market exclusive character. I really like how they release this character. I hope they do more like that in the future. He's definitely a really good character for sure. Now we have Sawyer, my boy Sawyer, one of my favorite characters in RTS, but unfortunately he isn't going to be that high tier. There is not a defense team leader in the game. Every leader gives out HP pretty much, except Ezekiel, and like I said, Ezekiel's just kind of fallen off to the point where people don't really use him. He had potential. I think if they tweaked his kit a little bit, I think it was basically they made it so that his rush only works on defense when it comes to damage. If they made it so that worked all the time, but they made it so that his passive only gave him AP when he got takedowns when he's on defense, that would bring the balance back to the fact that he would be working the same way on defense teams, but on attack at least he'd be able to do damage. The amount of times I autofill on SR and he gets put in a team and he can't do any damage is just so many times. Next up we have Clem, and I say Clem is kind of like high B tier but low A tier. She can be really easily countered because of defense while stunned, but she is a really good character for challenge run, especially if you can get her to rush really quickly, just because she can stun basically the entire team. If you want to, you can potentially use her in an effect-based team, not a percentage damage team, so it doesn't matter if people have defense while stunned. If Clementine rushes really quick, there'll be loads of stuns everywhere, and they'll just be sitting there as the infection basically just wears down and takes out the characters. That potentially could be a good thing as well. Next up we have Gold Mythic Molly, who I think is going to be a pretty high B tier character. I think she would have been A tier without too much of a problem. Maybe in an S tier if her defense stats balance was a bit better. She would have been really good for defense teams. As it stands, she's a decent attack team medic, but you don't generally want the fight to go on for too long. But I think she'd be great for challenge run, really good for conquest, because you're going to be just getting random revives all the time, so that can actually be pretty useful. Now we have Michelle, and Michelle I think has potential to be a pretty good character. I'm going to put her in S tier, kind of how Alpha's in S tier, where she's just kind of like niche, But what she does, no one else can do to the level she does it. And I think she's still, you know, there's more to see from her. She reminds me quite a lot of Wangfa in the S-Class era, in terms of like when he came out, I was like, this guy looks good, but I think he's going to be good in like 6 months. And that's exactly what happened. I had the same feelings with Michelle in terms of the combos that she can potentially bring to the table. Next out, we're going to have Imani. And Imani, I would say, is like really high A tier or low S tier, primarily because of Easter Eva being able to potentially counter her. Just because she's a tank, you can get that rush off really early and absolutely obliterate Imani's. But if Eva has, you know, someone who deals with Eva, then I'd say that Imani's a solid S tier character, potentially even S tier, you know, S plus in the right combo, just because she's hard to control because of her specialist skill, and obviously she's got inbuilt decat resistance as well, and she's got some Halo on her kit as well. So it's just like a lot of these characters recently have got this sort of like combo, and it's hard to steal it away from her because she can consistently bring it back up, right? So that's always going to be the problem. Next up, we have the Wanderer, and I can't really put Wanderer in any other tier except S tier, because if I've got Christmas Carol here, I have to kind of put Wanderer here. But I'd still say, in my mind, Christmas Carol is a little bit better, just because Wanderer can potentially nuke himself when he's trying to do the whole camouflage stuff for attack teams. So he's kind of like missing the mark for me. I think if he only did one single hit, or at least you could control it so it was like a line of enemies that took crit damage, that would be much better, because then I could control it. I knew exactly who I was going to hit. It could still get countered, but it wasn't complete RNG who that second hit was going to be against, to be honest. Now we have the only S plus tier character on this list, and it is going to be Eris. She's going to be an S plus for sure. There is still ways to counter this character, but she is easily the strongest fast character. She was the character from Warrior Champion. She is not going to be available to anyone. I think this is honestly not great. I think her being available, let's say in like a month's time, where she becomes like an Ultra War character or something, would have been much more balanced. The fact that she is easily the best fast character and she's not available, like I say, I don't think that's too great in my mind. Next up, we have Arav, and I think Arav is like high A tier with potential S tier. Do I put him in S tier or A tier? I think I'll put him in S tier for now, because it will make my list look kind of weird if he's in A tier, but he's really low S tier, guys. Like, I mean, really, really low S tier. I'd sooner put him in A tier, honestly, but if I put him in A tier, like I say, he's just gonna make things look kind of... I'll put him in A tier. I think he's an A tier character. So this is it for my tier list, guys. As you can see, my D tier, C tier, B tier, A tier, S tier, and S plus tier. This is how I kind of feel how these characters line up. When I merge these characters into the other traits in a few weeks' time, I might tweak certain things based on how I've, you know, lined up certain characters. When I was saying characters are high A tier and low S tier, or high B tier and low A tier, I might, you know, put them up one or down one based on that, but it's probably not going to happen. I think I'm pretty happy with these lists. I could sooner move people down than up, honestly. I'd sooner move a character down than up, but I'm pretty happy with the list. If you have any thoughts on what I've said and what you would maybe tweak on these lists, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for tuning in, and as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.